Hi, I'm Jeremy Ruston, and welcome to the 100th TiddlyWiki Hangout. I'm the original creator of TiddlyWiki, and today I'm joined by Hegart. Hegart, would you like to say hi, introduce yourself, say where you're from, and something about your work with TiddlyWiki?
Yeah, kia ora tātou. My name is Hegart. I'm from Auckland, New Zealand, and I've been playing around with TiddlyWiki since about September last year. Yeah, I've learnt a lot. I've been on the Design Right course, and I've been learning progressively TiddlyWiki on that course. Yeah.
And we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute or two. Thank you, Hegart. Mal, hi. Would you like to say hello, something about yourself, where you're from, and your work with TiddlyWiki?
Sure. My name is Mal Gamble. I'm calling from Brisbane in Australia. I've been lurking around TiddlyWiki for about 4 years or so, mainly using it personally as just a journal application, which I find extremely useful, but also I've created a couple of note-keeping applications for a medicine student, and it's proven to be a very effective process. The student has now become a graduate doctor and has an invaluable resource available in her daily work to access all of her university notes.
Now you're making me remember, did you show us a prototype of that during the 10th anniversary hangout, or am I imagining?
Yes, I did.
Yes. Is there an update from then? It may be interesting to show it again. It was certainly an interesting story.
I'd probably have to spend a bit of time getting organised, but I could do that. It's a finished article now, I guess, and
yeah. Well, it might be useful to top the story in Hangout 63 or whichever one it was that was the 10th anniversary one. We'll talk about Design Right first, Mal, and then okay. if you're ready, we'll come back to that. And last but not least in the introductions, Mario. Hello and welcome. Very glad you could join us. Would you like to introduce yourself, say where you're from, and something about your work with TiddlyWiki?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Mario Pitsch from Austria, near Salzburg. I contributed to TiddlyWiki 5 with the language translation to German. I'm using TiddlyWiki Classic and TiddlyWiki 5, both of them for note-taking. And also I'm a little bit scared about that TiddlyWiki space goes away. I'm still using it quite a lot, so I will miss it also quite a lot. So we have to have a look. How can we, I don't know, have resources like this again?
Excellent point. Okay. So today there's a few items that I put on the agenda. Let me very briefly screen share to show you. So hopefully you can see this screen share. So this is at hangout-100.tiddlyspot.com, and the Tiddler called agenda opens automatically. I was proposing that we kick off with the Design Right course. We've talked about it a few times in the Hangouts. It's basically a course run by Steve Schneider, a professor at the State University of New York. Oh, sorry, I forgot I was still screen sharing. Who's a political scientist, I believe, is Steve's original field. And he's been a TiddlyWiki enthusiast for many years and has now started teaching a hypertext course to students at SUNY. And he's also made it available as an online course. And Hegart, for instance, was an existing member of the TiddlyWiki community who, when the course kicked off, took the opportunity of being a remote attendee. Is that the word, Hegart?
Yeah, I'd say so. A distance learner.
I was going to ask you to tell us a bit more about the experience, Hegart. So, where you were before you joined the course, why you decided to join the course, what happened in the course, whether it was what you expected, and all that kind of thing. And then there's a few things I'd like to say about from my perspective of participating in it. Hegart, yes, what made you join the course, and take it from there?
Well, okay, like I was saying in Hangout 99, I came from a MediaWiki background, and I found things to be quite different in TiddlyWiki. I particularly wanted to use TiddlyWiki rather than MediaWiki because of the lack of a requirement for a server stack, and that's what really drew me to TiddlyWiki. But I was finding it quite difficult to conceptualize some of the methods, the ways of doing things in TiddlyWiki. And
so you had a sense in which you weren't, you were either struggling with TiddlyWiki or not quite getting everything out of it that you thought you might be able to.
Yeah, I was particularly struggling with the concept of your view templates and the way they worked. I had absolutely no idea at all about them. And macros I struggled with, but I could basically get the idea.
And given that you'd worked with MediaWiki, there were other things of comparable complexity that you'd been routinely handling. So you thought of it as an obstacle that you could get over by learning, I assume.
Absolutely, yeah.
So one of the interesting things from my perspective is that some of the participants in the course, the people at SUNY, they basically have to choose an allocation of courses. I'm not sure how it all works, but a few different modules or something. And so essentially there are students there who, putting it bluntly, don't want to be there. I mean, they are taking the course in some sense because it was the least worst option, and they've got no intrinsic interest necessarily in TiddlyWiki. And so I've found this to be really interesting, watching people being forced to use TiddlyWiki. So most of the time, most of us who talk about TiddlyWiki are enthusiasts for it, and that doesn't make us blind to its shortcomings. But it's terribly interesting to see other people grappling with it, say, without that starting point. And they, in many cases, I think, grapple with what it's for. But in other cases, they've come up with some really interesting ways of describing it and thinking about it. It's been very thought-provoking for me.
I would totally agree with that. I was using TiddlyWiki for about 3 months before I started on the Design Right course, and in that period of time, during those 3 months, I contributed quite significantly to the discussions on the TiddlyWiki official forums. And when I made the move through to the Design Right discussion forums, I continued that vein, and I found that I was being quite verbose compared to some of the other students on the course, and it got to be a bit of a problem, actually. So I had to slow things down and perhaps not post quite so much on their forums.
And that was, you were posting a lot of detailed technical intricacies that were opaque to the other members of the course because they hadn't got...
Absolutely.
How interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it made for a fascinating spectrum. One of the things I was wanting to show was Steve, well, I think it's one of your final exercises. People had to write reflections on the course. And like all the writings that people have done as part of the course, that is itself in TiddlyWiki. And Steve has sort of knitted together through TiddlyWikis interlinked in Dropboxes this really very interesting story with multiple narratives. There's Steve's story of what he set out to do, because he spent several months working on wiki content, sort of describing what he was trying to do, and then it's now interwoven with some really delightful and random and different stuff. But in terms of the projects that you've done, and can you talk a bit about the projects that you've done, the projects that you were assigned?
Yeah, well, one of the earlier ones was taking Dr. Seuss's text Green Eggs and Ham and hypertextualizing it. I thought that was quite interesting, and I was challenged afterwards by Professor Steve to take it a step further and actually hypertext practically every single word in the poem. And yeah, that's not quite the way I would normally work, but he was kind of pushing the point about hypertextualizing and the way that it can draw out new things out of a traditional text. It was really interesting.
Yes, I think that's a great example of the fact that something that, to a certain extent, it was a technical exercise. How do you do things in TiddlyWiki? But by grounding it in a work of literature, I really liked the way that Steve pushed us to think about the writing elements as well. And Steve's approach is, I think, quite analytical, as you would hope of an academic. And generally, one of the things that I've really loved about participating in the course, and I should say my participation has been very low level. I've turned up once a week for a 1-hour conversation with Steve, which is available on YouTube, which are available on YouTube. And the discussions are kind of steered by Steve, but I mean, feel very sort of free to me. One of the things that I notice is Steve kind of wanting to understand the techniques of TiddlyWiki by categorizing them, and a big part of the story of this semester has been working through first an analysis that I'd actually that appealed to me, which has about 7 things. Sort of says you've got tiddlers, they've got titles, they've got fields, and then you bring in links, and then you bring in tags, and then you bring in lists, and so on. So all these sorts of elements. And Steve really, over the period of the course, we pushed at this point a lot more than I would normally do. And I think we came up with a really interesting kind of different way of looking at it at the end, which was roughly, I think, Hegart, you might need to correct me here, but I think it was that we came up with linking and transclusion as being the key techniques within TiddlyWiki, and found a way to make everything else be subordinate to those. And I really liked that. I think actually we came down to 4 things in the list, didn't we, Hegart?
He did have the 4 words. I remember there was the text, the wiki, the tiddly, and one other one. I can't remember what that was.
Anyway, yeah. I mean, I shouldn't try to. If you're interested in this stuff, you can go back and watch the course.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know there was an exam on this.
No, exactly. I was sorry. I was correcting myself, because giving a poor quality précis of a 13-week, quite in-depth course is exactly what I shouldn't try to do. But as to say, for me, the entire process of being so sort of analytical, of working through things in such a deliberate way, I mean, I think my own work is reasonably chaotic, was really fascinating, really interesting experience. Hegart, let me screen share. I'd like to just show perhaps a couple of the... Oh, so the first thing here, Steve's got all of the conversations on YouTube along with the workshops, so basically the entire material of the course. There's also Steve's master wiki for the course, and here I've just added links to the to some of the work that was done in the course. So this is,
oh yes, Ezra's work.
Absolutely amazing. I thought this was really beautiful.
Yes.
So Azra, again, I'll get these details wrong, but I think Azra is a member, an in-person member of the course, and so conceivably fits into the category of people who weren't previously interested in TiddlyWiki. And what you see here is a really interesting, so she's used quite simple TiddlyWiki techniques, noticeably sliders, to tell her story in a pretty hypertextual way. So there's a chunk about her childhood in Europe, which again includes lots of links and external links and so on. So it's a really classic kind of stitching together a story, stitching together a narrative that the reader can explore in lots of different ways. And so really great example, highly recommended. Then this is an example of some of the more sort of technical stuff I guess you did. The idea here was, how do you make a table that shows so for each of these individuals, we've got cards about each person and it records their birthday. And then here the question was, I think, how do you make this table that shows all of the birthdays in the right month? And again, I thought this was quite interesting because Steve chose pretty high level sort of operations, not operations, high level tasks to perform. And they have multiple ways of doing them. And doing these tasks certainly helps you to think about the tools that you're using.
There was actually a bit of collaboration on that one, actually. Brianna's one, the one you were looking at previously. Yeah, that's a bit of my work in there.
Well, I seem to remember what the thing that I particularly liked about this is there's some archaeological evidence of that underneath the macros.
Yeah, I based it on cars originally.
Yeah, and it's really super. I think it made me think about, particularly in a teaching environment, the difference between teaching with specific examples and general classes. And I garbled, I think I've heard it said, that people learn from specific examples and then they generalize in their heads. And if you try and teach people the generalizations, it doesn't really stick. And so this is kind of interesting that what's going on here, list models of make, could be described in some sort of Java-esque group item by meta item or something. There would be some form of words that could generically describe what it does in terms of what it does to these data items. But instead, list models
just make some models of cars.
Yeah. So it's super clear like that. Everybody who understands what a car is and models a make obviously immediately implies cars or dishwashers or a whole load of interchangeable things. But it very clearly communicates what's going on. And again, very interesting to see this being done in an explicitly teaching context.
And it was fun as a collaborative exercise as well. It was great.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were so many things that came out of the course that I thought were great bonuses. I mean, Steve has ended up teaching a course that enables people to learn about open source collaboration. And that's pretty cool, I think, because as we've discussed before, most open source projects are pretty impenetrable unless you're a developer. So by basing the project around TiddlyWiki, it gives people who are not a developer a very kind of first-hand taste of the experience of being an open source developer, that experience of collaborating with other people, of doing your work in the open. So all of these wikis are on public URLs that other people in the course can look at. The 9/11 wiki, I'm not sure who did this one, but it's a topic that Steve's very interested in and has covered a few times. And my interpretation is that it's a really, in a number of levels, it's a very interesting thing to study. There's a lot of material, and some of the material is quite authoritative. And in a technical sense, within TiddlyWiki, it's quite interesting to see how you can tell a complex story. And so one of the interesting techniques, if I can make it work, is that there's Hegart, perhaps you managed to get this
It
work.
was the timelines you're talking about.
Yeah. So basically, there's an audio recording of the Senate hearings. Would that be the right expression? And these audio recordings are excerpted within the wiki, but I can't see how to make it work. I think it's changed since I last saw it. Maybe it's been broken. I'm not sure.
Ah, there we go. There's a listen to. No?
Okay. Anyway, it was say quite an interesting example. This one, I don't recall. Anyway, so a very interesting for the participants. I think an interesting blend of a course with a strong practical basis. You come out of it learning to do something that you didn't know how to do before, whilst also exploring intellectually quite interesting areas. So a lot of the time we were relating very strongly or talking about the relationship between TiddlyWiki and what you might call classical hypertext. So hypertext has 50 odd years of history now, 51 years of history, and TiddlyWiki has, well, you know, it's an implementation of some of the ideas of hypertext, but by no means all, and a playground for exploring, you know, new ideas about hypertext. So one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about it today was because on the 23rd of May, a new semester starts for the course. I'm sure we'll talk about it on the mailing list before then to remind everybody. But if you fancy it, it's a great opportunity to learn more about TiddlyWiki, to get more involved with some of the people in the community. Hegart, are you going to attend this semester as well?
I wasn't planning to. I know Steve has got some things lined up that he would like me to look at in the summer semester, so it's possible.
And from your point of view, attending the course from the other side of the world on a radically different time zone, how logistically easy was it?
I didn't really have too many problems. Most of the coursework and the course content could be viewed asynchronously. The discussions did need to be synchronous. However, they were pretty much optional anyway. So yeah, I don't think it was actually too much of a problem really being on the other side of the world.
So there's, yes, I guess there would, yes, great. Well, so it's practical for people in any time zone to join the course, and I say highly recommended. I'm planning to have the same involvement this time around. So, and I guess because we'll be teaching a new batch of students, we'll hopefully be making an improved journey through the same material as we gradually refine the course. Hegart's just posted your semester project. Would you like to share it, Hegart?
Probably not. The screen sharing from this end is a bit flaky.
Shall I share it from here so we can have a
Yeah, if you could, that'd be good, thanks.
So, link address. Just while I'm doing that faffing around, let's also welcome Atul and ArmChar Would you both like to say, we'll start ArmChar You're on my left. Would you like to introduce yourself, say where you're from, and something about your work with TiddlyWiki? I think, ArmChar, do you have a microphone? Atul, you have a microphone, but you're...
Yeah. I just started it.
Oh, sorry, ArmChar, you go first. Say hi and tell us where
Hey,
you're from.
I've been there before a while back. My usual handle is Hegart. Remembering me today. I'm a long-time user of and I had a great year, so I didn't get much time to spend time on TiddlyWiki itself, but I'm probably gonna be more into it for the next couple or 3 months or so. So I'm trying to catch up.
We're getting terrible audio quality from you, ArmChar, but got the gist of it, which is great news. ArmChar, for everybody else's benefit, was very active in the community maybe 2 years ago or so. And so great to see you back. One of the things that you were doing that I really appreciated was writing very powerfully about some of the challenges of getting TiddlyWiki more popular. And I'll be very interested to see how you think about where the project has got to since you were last involved. And Atul, hello. Would you like to say hello and introduce yourself, say where you're from?
Yeah, Atul Grover. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. You're fine.
Okay, great. I'm from Chandigarh. It's a city in India, North India, and I know there's a lot of potential of using TiddlyWiki in a third world country where we need to go offline. And there is a skill development project that I'm working on. Haven't really started actively using TiddlyWiki. I'm just waiting for the opportune moment, but I have already translated TiddlyWiki in Hindi and Punjabi, and there are a few more languages that are underway. So looking forward.
Really? More languages?
Yeah.
That's great. I must say the Hindi and Punjabi versions look on my machine about the most beautiful TiddlyWiki translations we've got, because nowadays, I don't know what it's like for you, but the quality of the typography is really amazing, and it just looks quite beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. I guess it's more to do with the language itself than the translation is just the word. Yeah.
Well, I'm a terrible monoglot. I only speak English and poor quality French, I'm afraid to say, and I'm shamed by how good other people are at languages. Anyway, welcome to you both. Very glad that you could join us. We were just about to have a look at Hegart's semester project in the Design Right course, and Atul, sorry, man, could somebody mute Atul? I think. So this is Hegart's project, and it's around CRM, which is customer relationship management.
Although in this instance it's actually contact relationship management. We've scaled it down to a home user perspective.
Yeah. Yes, a people manager or something. Oh, well, it's being... Oh, here we go.
Ah, there we go.
So, would you like to just talk us through it?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is the main welcome screen that you've got on there at the moment. I'm using tabs, as you can see, and I'm using the caption with icons. I've stored the default icons and made them PNG files rather than SVGs, and so they're not really properly scalable.
That's so interesting. Yes, and they probably look different on your browser as well.
There we go. Yeah,
Okay.
so sometimes that does cause some problems. Okay, for instance, I've got Eric's pre-release copy of the combo box in there somewhere, and the control buttons on that kind of get mucked up a bit because they're not properly scalable anymore. Yeah, like that. There we go, classic example.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the problem with the non-scalability of the PNG files.
So we've got tiddlers for each item of information about each person. So Abigail Jones
That's
is...
the idea, yes.
So there's a tiddler
Yeah,
called Abigail Jones, and can I still get to the... And Abigail Jones, we've got the image URL, caption, the icon, okay. Tags.
And so that's a company that she works for there.
And then each of the individual items of information just carries that same tag of Abigail Jones. How interesting. Yes, how interesting.
One thing I'm particularly proud of is the way I've got the turning on and turning off of the documentation. If you go back to the main screen,
yeah.
Okay, and then go to the cog for the control panel in my tabs, and then that one there, this here, I can turn on and turn off for the documentation and everything. The sidebar search, see, is disappearing and things like that. And if you go down to the bottom one there, design right documentation, show and hide all that, and that turns.
That's the stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's the one.
That's the sort of backstage view.
Yes.
Well, it's fascinating. And one of the things that is kind of noticeable about TiddlyWiki, or frustrating about TiddlyWiki, really, is that it's incredibly customizable, and yet the vast majority of times, for good reasons, people tend to customize the same things and leave a lot looking the same. And so it looks, to the casual observer, it looks as though all TiddlyWikis need to look the same, as if everything...
That's exactly the comment that my collaborator Andrew Myers on the Design Right course has been saying, is that one of his goals for Tiddly CRM is to make it not look like TiddlyWiki.
I really like that, yes, very much.
Yeah.
And so, okay, your data model is a really classic TiddlyWiki data model, isn't it? You've actually got nestings as well.
Yeah, well, I've taken the basic principles that Professor Steve taught right from the start of the course and applied them throughout this project. So it does actually follow the tagging method which we were taught right at the start.
It's really interesting. The other thing is that hilariously, when Hegart first posted this to the discussion group, there was a concerned posting from somebody that that Hegart was inadvertently revealing personal information of a bunch of people. And it turns out that one of the fun things that Hegart did was devise an algorithm for generating all of this sample data. So it's quite detailed sample data with organization names, plausible addresses, and so on. Really cool.
I can show you the spreadsheet in the background for that if you want, really easily.
Yes. So yes, explain how it works. That's,
Okay. If you just go to a new tab in your browser and go to the exact same URL, but drop off the -testing on the end.
That's very easy.
No, the original URL. I gave you the short URL, the bit.do. So it's bit.do / Tiddly CRM - sample data.
Yeah.
And just get rid of, there we go, and there's our spreadsheet there.
So how did you generate the spreadsheet then?
Well, it comes mainly from a sheet which you can't see. You need to go across to the right
so
more.
you
List of sheets.
You manually created the data. You sort of copied and pasted it until you had what you needed.
Yeah, if you go right across to the sheet on the right further, you need to press the right button until you no cross more. Oh, okay, random source. You can just see it on the left of your screen there. Random source. Okay, that's where it all comes from here. So these first three columns, B, C, and D, are taken from a government open data project, which is a list of the most common people's names in New Zealand. Okay, surname and also the male and female names. So I've taken the top 40 of those, and I randomized those together to be able to create my random people. And I've done the same with the streets and suburbs and things like that. It's all random, and then from there I randomize everything else onto it.
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And great to see. And yes, you mentioned Andy Myers. He's participating in the course as well, or is he just collaborating on this?
Yeah, he's in the course as well, and he's been collaborating with me on that semester project.
Excellent. Anything from anybody else about Design Right before we move on? Okay. So the next thing I was going to pick up was something that Mario suggested, which is the idea that we might have a in-person meetup this summer. We'd got as far as thinking that maybe it needs to be in 2 or 3 months in order to give people time to make travel arrangements. So perhaps I think that might actually push it into September. How would that be for you, Mario?
Well, yeah, I think it's a little bit late, but I'm okay for this. So.
I mean, the other alternative might be to go for a date in July.
Yeah, probably.
You mentioned holiday at the end of June, but how are you fixed for end of July?
I'm at the holidays at the end of June, yeah.
So, okay, well, I wonder about one of those. I'll update the agenda to just jot this stuff down, but so we'll call it 2006 meetup. Forgive me. I think there are 2 weekends that look possible: the 15th, 16th, 17th of July, or the 22nd, 23rd, 24th of July. So I'll make a posting to the mailing list after this, and just let's see if there are various people who've expressed an interest in coming to a meetup. I think Alex Huff and Jed Carty, for instance. So we'll see how those dates work for people.
Yeah.
Excellent. And of course, for Mal and Hegart, we would encourage you to have an Antipodean TiddlyWiki get together if you can manage it. How far away is Brisbane from New Zealand? Probably further away than I am from Mario, I imagine.
Probably. It's about a 3-hour flight.
Oh, okay, okay. That probably is actually similar. Austria from here probably is a 3-hour flight.
No, yeah, the whole traveling is about 3 hours. So I think the flight is 1.5 hours or something like this.
Okay, okay. So I had a couple of other things. One was I've just discovered quite an interesting thing that was new to me, which is called live coding. Let me show you what it is. And it's one of those rather surprising things where I discover that there's a whole phenomenon that I don't know about. So this site allows people to do a live screencast of coding. When I last went here, the example here was a much better example, but we can have a quick look at one, I guess. Oh. So here's... So very similar to what we're doing. There's a... Okay, that one's not on yet. There's a chat window, and maybe we look at one of the older videos. And how can you tell one that started? Anyway, it is astonishingly popular. So you can see on the live streams that these people have thousands of views. And looking through some of them, it crossed my mind it might be quite interesting. It'd be an interesting. Here we are on the 100th Hangout. I've found the discipline of having regular Hangouts, not so much the discipline, the habit of having regular Hangouts, to be really good and interesting. Obviously, it's interesting because of the guest, because it's not just me talking to myself. The coding experience, you know, it's quite different than everything else that I do, if you see what I mean. And trying to share that experience, I don't know, might be quite interesting. And a lot of the work that I do on TiddlyWiki is little small bug fixes, you know, tasks that have a nice, well-defined beginning, middle, and end that I think could tell a good story. So I might give that a bash and see how that goes. I noticed that JavaScript screencasts are quite popular, so maybe there would be people outside the community interested too. Mary, have you ever watched a screencast of coding?
No, not really.
Well, it's part of, maybe you've come across something called Twitch, which is, again, one of these sort of huge phenomenons that one can be completely unconscious of. But there's a culture nowadays for live streaming, playing video games.
Yeah, I've seen some of, but not some. One of those. They played the game. I don't even know the name, but it's really funny. They have commentators and everything. And this is really a big event. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. So I'm going to dip my toes into that peculiar new culture.
The type of thing I can take back to the makerspace movement as well. That sounds really, really interesting.
Yes, I mean, I wonder whether it's a shame Alex Huff isn't here. He's talked in the past about his. I don't want to put words into his mouth, but you know, like many of the people who aren't coders who are involved in TiddlyWiki, he's kind of interested in the coding process, kind of interested in understanding it, and at least understanding what it feels like. And it's possible that doing a video cast would capture what it feels like much better than GitHub. I mean, GitHub captures everything that happens when you code, but in a very sort of dry way. There's not much of a story there.
I had no idea about JavaScript and HTML as I started to view TiddlyWiki. So as I found out about TiddlyWiki, then I dig deeper a little bit, and then I started coding JavaScript. I do have a background in programming, but I didn't know about JavaScript. So
yeah, it's a story I see happening again and again where people join the community. They they say, normally they repeat, I am not a coder. Matt Goldman is an example. He regularly says, I'm not a coder. But I think he's already traveling down that slope towards becoming a coder, and it's the gateway drug of CSS. You need to learn CSS to get basic things done in TiddlyWiki and HTML, and eventually JavaScript yields its secrets.
Yeah.
There was I did jot down a couple of questions that had cropped up on the discussion group that I hadn't had a chance to respond to. I'm not sure that one of them was from Matt, was about the upgrade experience on TiddlySpot, and well, Matt had made a post recognizing that the current process is a bit clumsy, and unfortunately there are browser restrictions that make that tricky, but I'd still really like to figure out a cleaner mechanism. There was also a question from Devon on how plugins are published, which is a question, a topic that we've kind of touched on before. There's also the point that Mario mentioned about the demise of TiddlySpace. TiddlySpace is going to be switched off by BT at the end of the year. Maybe we should start with that one. Mario, I can see from my RSS feeds that you're still using TiddlySpace. Anybody else on the course use TiddlySpace?
I'm using TiddlySpace for fast note taking, because when I opened the browser, I have pinned 2 tabs with my spaces and my bookmarks, and I use it quite often. In normal cases, most of the stuff is private, but if something is okay, then I say, okay, make it public, and that's it. So publishing is really fast. First record it in private, and then make some little refactorings and say public, and you're done. And I don't know, several weeks ago, I refactored a script from FND a little bit to get backups. So I have backups now. I wanted to publish this, but there needs to be a little bit more documentation, and it at the moment only works for Unix-like systems. So so needs a little bit of refactoring, and then it should be possible to download some, let's say, working TiddlyWiki backups from all your Tiddly spaces in one go. Because I don't know, I have about 120 spaces, and I don't know, about half of it have real content, and downloading it one by one is really cumbersome. So I made this script, and it's faster, much more convenient.
Okay, interesting. So in terms of dealing with it, so I think there's lots of different stories about why people use TiddlySpace and what they use it for. So it's important that we do share things like the scripts that you described, so that because I think different people will need different migration plans from TiddlySpace, I suspect. Partly because there's new options available that weren't when TiddlySpace was created. The one, for me, there's one very significant project on TiddlySpace, which is the Anna Freud Center Ambit project that we've talked about before.
Do they have a replacement already?
I am involved in discussions with them to try and figure out what their options are. So
how about the TiddlyWiki Classic community documentation? Isn't that also on TiddlySpace?
Yeah, it is. That's slightly easier because we could make that be a GitHub repo, and it wouldn't be so convenient for people to edit it. But now, as we it's that would be a reasonable thing to do, but that we might be able to. I mean, there would be not the optimum thing to do, but TiddlySpace Ambit's much more difficult. I mean, the reason I say that is because the tiddlywiki.org community documentation hasn't been updated for ages.
Yeah,
so it's pretty much only a snapshot that we'd need to preserve.
I also think that TiddlyWiki Classic, so let's say compiling TiddlyWiki Classic, download some stuff from TiddlySpace. So the official documentation when you create TiddlyWiki Classic downloads some.
Yes, absolutely. So we need to move that content into GitHub, and that's a great example actually. That GitHub just wasn't. Well, I suppose it was there, but it wasn't accessible enough for us to consider using it for the TiddlyWiki Classic documentation when we made that move. It was quite a while ago, I think, when we moved the.
Yeah, when TiddlyWiki when TiddlySpace was developed. I don't know, after 1 year or something like this, then the whole documentation has been moved to TiddlySpace because it was easier for different people to edit it.
I'm still, one of the main, what's the word? The point for me of TiddlySpace was to explore a simple, consistent model of sharing that could work on TiddlyWeb, but was simpler than the underlying mechanisms in TiddlyWeb. So this very simple idea of each space having a private core and an outer ring of public content. And I'm interested in other ways of replicating that. So for example, and I'm not proposing to go off and do this, but you could imagine a tiddlyspot-based implementation where when within each HTML file, within each standalone wiki, there would be an encrypted block of tiddlers. That would be the private content, and there would be a bunch of public tiddlers. And then we could make it so that when such a TiddlyWiki starts up, that at runtime it goes off to the other referenced included wikis and includes their content dynamically. So I think that's plausible. It would be kind of slow and clunky, but very interesting to have kind of boiled that functionality down to something that's so simple that it could be run on essentially static servers. And so, if you, for instance, Mario, migrated to that structure, it would give you almost as much future-proofing as just using a standalone TiddlyWiki file does today, if you see what I mean, because there would be no online server.
Yeah. For me, that's not actually not really a problem because I know how to use TiddlyWeb. So
yes, yes, of course. but in a case like yours,
but I was discovering the problem as I had a closer look at the TiddlyWiki Classic repository. Then I saw how it was built, and I saw that it accesses content from TiddlySpace, and then I thought, oh, okay, I need a backup again, and I found FND script again, and changed it a little bit that it fits my needs. And that's the status quo at the moment. So I have a backup, but I also thought how we can make it accessible for the community, that they really have something that is working on a file basis, and gives them back their content, because I think this is a really great advantage of TiddlyWiki, that you are the owner of your own content. And downloading it from TiddlySpace, then you are really, again, the owner of your own content. You don't have the whole flexibility, but you have your content.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, as you know, I still think that's. I think it is from that stems many of the interesting characteristics of TiddlyWiki. We had I guess you might be thinking about the same thread that I was on the groups, So
yeah, I was thinking about that one as well.
so let me find.
This is a very interesting discussion.
Well, one thing that was actually a bit disappointing about it was that there was there was a bit of misunderstanding right at the beginning, and the thing that it just reminded me that it is very important in these kind of online communities that we assume good intentions, and I was slightly surprised that we, in some sense, are so sensitive that that it's possible for us to doubt somebody's intentions. So, but let me, I'm being a bit gnomic, let me explain what happened. Josiah says, ciao, Jeremy. Both here and on the dev channel, I've seen you write about your concerns about taking TiddlyWiki too far towards server-dependent systems. I totally agree. I'm one of the silent users of TiddlyWiki. I developed for my own use many customized versions. I never published them. I just use them locally. The ideal TiddlyWiki step towards more online server-mediated systems would erase its specialness, in my opinion. The one area where TiddlyWiki might be improved for me is being able to post to social networks more easily. But interactive stuff that requires dependent linkage to function is not a good idea to have at the front. It's not that I in any way think that scaling up for server services is bad per se. However, the minimalist model of the one page is undoubtedly its brilliance. Many thanks for inventing this thing. So there's some confusion there because Josiah's first language is not English, it's not all as clearly stated as it could be. But my reading was that Josiah's referring to a tension that I've referred to before, that TiddlyWiki exists in these two forms, as a standalone HTML file, as a Node.js application. The Node.js application was created in order to be the means by which we create the standalone version. So there's a, I run the Node.js version on my computer to generate the standalone HTML files that are uploaded to tiddlywiki.com. So it exists in these two forms. Both forms are necessary, as in the standalone form wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the Node.js form that builds it and makes it possible for it to be created. But also kind of the other way around. The Node.js aspects of TiddlyWiki are not in of themselves, I think, that interesting. It's when you think about the standalone version that it becomes more interesting. So
I was particularly put in mind of when you were talking in the Design Right conversations, Jeremy, about creating TiddlyWikis on the fly and thinking of them as being like documents, like a Word document. And that to me is the understanding of the single page TiddlyWiki, is that it's just like a document is create at a will and then destroy it, and
And in order for that to be true for users, it has to be concrete. So one of the issues, if I create something on Google Docs or inside LinkedIn, it's an abstract thing. It's hard for me to know that I've deleted it. It's hard for me to know who's got access to it, and so on. It's this point about control. So being offline, being a standalone file, for me isn't just about being able to work when the internet doesn't work, but it's the mechanism by which any of us can gain absolute control of our data.
And on the other hand, this is also the desire which comes up immediately. So you have this absolute control as a file page, but then you want to tweet something. Yeah? So then the social aspect comes in immediately, and this is a little bit where TiddlyWiki lacks a little bit of functionality. Yeah? But yeah, that's
it's very. The indie webcamp people have done a lot of development on this idea of having, you have a brain that you control. In that case, it's a server typically. You do your stuff to that server, and it syndicates, it cross-posts to public services like Twitter. I would also find that useful. I do a lot of drafting of GitHub issues in TiddlyWiki, so I'll create a markdown tiddler, draft it, and then I'll manually copy and paste it to GitHub, and I'd love to be able to kind of push it automatically, and then to have the record in my wiki to be updated with the assigned ID for the ticket. There is, however, really annoyingly a small problem, which is as you know, that browsers now don't like files that's been loaded from a file URI accessing the network, and so making that kind of thing work will be yet again another of those challenges of swimming uphill, up a waterfall. When there are people deliberately trying to shoot at you because browsers are trying to prevent you from doing those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's right.
So yes, I think we. It would be great to explore that a little more, but I can also see, we've got the Twederation, the TiddlyWiki Federation experiments as well, and I don't know, if I had time for either of them, I'd probably be more interested in pushing that forwards. Anyway, so the reaction to the thread was initially was people saying, yeah, I agree. Whilst I can and do use the Node.js version, it's the standalone version that makes things special. But then there was a bit of actually my version of the thread has been corrupted by the title being changed during its editing, so I can't see all of the messages in front of me at the moment. But there was a good deal of strong feelings being expressed. Let's see if we can. So one of the responses was, exactly which arguments against server dependency is it that are praised here? I have not heard them. And yeah, so a bit of slightly frustrating confusion, but I think we all ended up agreeing with each other in the end.
I think the original post was only expressing some some, I don't know how I can say it, concerns that the server side will dominate in the future. And he thinks that the single file aspect is worth keeping. So I think this is the basic misunderstanding. So that everyone thinks that because this is the general trend at the moment, so that you have centralized, strong power companies that get all your content, and then they own all your content, and they own you and your information, or the information about you, and producing money with it. And so, yeah, the single file aspect of TiddlyWiki has great advantage because you can keep your stuff private, and that's it.
Yeah.
I think your point just now, Jeremy, about the interdependence of the two is really important. That the single page relies on Node.js and vice versa.
Yes,
I think it's a really important concept.
Yeah, it's the other thing I'd note is that for almost all of the 5 years that I've been working on TiddlyWiki 5, you'll see a repeated pattern where features are much more fully developed in the standalone version than the server version, which proves where my allegiance lies. So, for instance, the plugin library. doesn't work properly when you're running under Node.js. It pretty much only works in the browser. So in fact, one of my goals for the year is to get the multi-user experience of TiddlyWiki much better. And that's about fixing things that work but just aren't quite kind of convenient enough. But that doesn't mean that I want to switch attention. It means that I think that the server functionality is a bit too experimental and underdeveloped at the moment.
Now that's interesting, Jeremy. In my experience, I had installed a copy of TiddlyWiki on GitHub using Daniela Rodriguez's method, and I presume, I've never used Node.js, but I presume that it was functioning the same way, that to edit a tiddler I needed to edit a single file, and it was being treated as a file. So once again, the plugin library wouldn't work in that situation.
Yeah.
What we've been doing on Tiddly CRM, the project I've been working on, is my collaborator Andrew has actually come up with a new method of hosting, which is kind of a hybrid of both GitHub and Dropbox, and it's been quite interesting to play with that.
Can you explain what it does?
Okay, what it does, the way I understand it, okay, I'm no expert on GitHub, as you know, is that it hosts the HTML file as a single page in GitHub Pages. Rather than hosting them all as individual tiddlers, it hosts the single page. So when I do a push, I'm making a commit on the entire HTML file.
Okay, so that sounds like you've got TiddlyWiki HTML files stored in GitHub, but you're functionally using it in the same way that you would if they were stored in Dropbox.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
Which actually allows me to import a plugin directly and resave. I can actually save and upload to GitHub, boom, because I'm actually uploading through Dropbox and then doing a commit from there.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure how you've got all that stuff working, but
I'm not either. Andrew came up with that one.
But so I think for me, over the next few months, there's two related areas that I want to do further development in. One is the traditional multi-user server side, so that's getting TiddlyWiki working better with TiddlyWeb and being able to do Tiddly space type things, and that's partly so that we can start to do start to migrate Tiddly space sites to TiddlyWiki 5. But there's also the federation stuff, and the federation stuff splits out into two again, actually, because we've got all of the work that Jed's been doing on federation has been around federating the standalone TiddlyWikis, but we also need to be able to federate the Node.js versions. So two sort of complementary directions of travel there. Fixing up the multi-user experience so that things work in a traditional client-server environment, and getting this flexible federation architecture up and running, which allows standalone TiddlyWiki files to interoperate with server-based TiddlyWikis. And meanwhile, the standalone version will still be worked on as well. Excuse me. It's just that both of those things, I think, they're kind of opportunities that TiddlyWiki doesn't fully grasp at the moment. You know, the federation stuff we've got working experimentally. We know that it can work, but we haven't got it usable and useful. The multi-user experience, similarly, is really not practical for ordinary users yet. Let's break for a second and ask Sylvain to introduce himself. Sylvain, hello, welcome. How are you doing?
Hello, how do you do?
So that you are you in Paris?
No, I'm moved. I'm not anymore in near Paris. I'm in the south, near Bordeaux.
Ah,
yes. 50,
very nice.
50 miles.
Very nice region. Good wine.
Yes, I was just thinking perhaps. So we were before you joined. We were talking about doing a European.
We are near Cognac. If you
yes. Well, of course, the place in France that I've never visited that I would love to go is Champagne.
You're welcome.
But we were talking about doing it in the UK, either Oxford or London, on one of 2 weekends in the middle of July, the 14th, 15th. Oh, sorry. The 16th, 17th of July, or the 23rd, 24th of July. Does that sound theoretically feasible for you? Because I think you said you might be able to hop over. Do you think, Sylvain?
What? Sorry.
Would those the dates of the 2 weekends in the middle of July, 16th of July and 23rd of July?
I'm not sure I will be free, so I don't know.
Well, let's hope so. I'll start a thread on the mailing list about it after this discussion, anyway. Okay. I'm just switching back to the agenda. I think we touched on all the things that I'd jotted down. Anything from anybody else? Oh, yes, of course, I've realized something else. 5.1.12, possibly we should talk about. And in particular, I think we've got the right people here to have one final discussion about the size of the new editor toolbar. So I've posted about this before, that there's the new editor toolbar in 5.1.12 means that has swelled the core of TiddlyWiki by between 20 and 25%.
I don't think the size is not the important thing.
That was size measured in number of tiddlers.
Yeah, but yeah, okay, that's. I think performance on a mobile is the thing, because it's getting slower and slower on my phone, and I have 8 cores. So this is the biggest problem. I think the iframe, if a browser starts an iframe, it actually starts a whole new environment, and I think it's a resource problem on mobile devices. I've seen the discussion last time. I really would like to have the empty HTML not be empty, but have the core plus the toolbar. So that I'm able to remove the toolbar. So I would like to go with something like batteries included, but removable. So I want to have it all, but I'd like to remove the batteries if I don't need them.
So could we separate that? There might be two concerns. Do you think that your concerns would be met by disabling the editor toolbar, the iframe, and all of those other elements, so that your runtime experience was faster? Or would that not meet your needs because you'd still have the size of those things in the core plugin?
I don't think the size is the biggest problem, because if someone only includes one image, then you get 300, 400K. If you make it smaller already, so if you have an image with a standard phone at the moment, you get 3 to 4 megabytes for one image. So the whole size discussion is not really valid anymore, at least for me. Yeah? So as soon as you have one image, then we don't need to talk about the size of the core, because.
So would you, if we, so to be more explicit, a checkbox, configuration checkbox that says don't use the rich editor, that would be your choice.
Yes, because I think if this checkbox actually would lower the need for resources, then yes. So because at the moment, if I switch from tiddlywiki.com from the recent or from open to the tools and to the tag list, the tag manager, it needs about 5 seconds, and that's not convenient anymore.
And that's even if you don't have a tiddler in edit mode. Is it?
Yes, yeah. This is the standard view mode. Yeah. So if I switch tabs, it's relatively slow.
So one thing that's you might be an interesting experiment to look at is the rich text editor is complex in terms of that tree of transclusions that creates it. And so I've found that it has quite an impact on refresh speed whether you've got a tiddler in edit mode open in the story river.
I have to have a look, and I have to try to do some remote debugging or remote profiling to actually see the times which TiddlyWiki internally can measure. So there is this, I don't know, how is the parameter, how is it called, where you can measure the time from the refresh rate and this stuff. So because at the moment I'm counting with my watch, with my wristwatch, and there I have the stop button. So I don't know, it's not very exact, but the problem is from version to version it feels slower with the mobile device.
So I think it may be that the steady increase in slowness that you're seeing, or the steady reduction in performance, isn't actually to do with the text editor, but is to do with the general rising complexity of TiddlyWiki taking more processing time for a refresh.
Yeah, we have a lot of let's say list built UI, where I think it has to do a lot of iterations through the whole to all the tiddlers. And I think this is even if the internal access of JavaScript is quite fast, we experience the slowdown there because everything is configurable at the moment. So I was thinking about already to remove some flexibility.
I think the issue is I think when we I'd really encourage that. So a mobile we don't have switchable page templates at the moment, but it's something that I've thought about a few times. So that one could switch to an entirely different page template for mobile devices, and that would be very interesting to see how that pans out. But I think what I'm going to take away is the need to make the iframey parts of the toolbar configurable.
Yeah. I have watched the last Hangout, and then I thought, because in the normal cases I would be one which says, okay, let's make it a plugin, and then I can remove it. But then I thought about the image problem. So whenever you take one image and include it into TiddlyWiki, then you don't have the right to argument about size, because you lost the right. And that's why I'm fine if this is part of the core. If we can keep the mobile experience fast. Well,
fixing the mobile experience is also on my finishing list. So the way that we clearly, it would be nice to have a hamburger menu or something so that we can fold out the sidebar. and access the sidebar without having to scroll back up to the top on mobile devices. And yeah, that needs improvement.
Yeah.
Generally the toolbar, I probably made a bit of a mistake. I added Alex Huff suggested the link tool, and so I added it, and I probably shouldn't have done because it's probably delayed finishing it for a couple of days.
Yeah. I also thought about having the editor toolbar as a plugin, but then after a while I thought it would be nice to have the icons be part of the core, because if you make some different functionality and you may need some icons to display them without the toolbar, the icons alone would be nice. So that's why, okay, if we include it, then we have the icons and the functionality, and if we can make it fast, then I'm happy.
The other thing about size that we've talked about before is how I very firmly believe we've not even scratched the surface of trying intentionally to make the TiddlyWiki core smaller. And there are many, from simplifying the SVG outlines, and there's SVG optimization tools for that, through to minifying and obfuscating, minifying the JavaScript code. I think there's enormous scope for reducing the size.
Yeah, but having the plain JavaScript is also really cool for debugging.
Yeah.
So you just go into the existing browser debug tools. You say make a breakpoint. You open the tiddler and you have a breakpoint and you can read it. There is no source map, no external tools, no complicated compilation steps, and all this stuff. So there's so much surrounding that is needed that you can have a debugging environment. Then we are back at the discussion, okay, how can we improve the whole build process? Yeah, because if we do minification of the source, then we need a build process which generates a source map, so we can have debugging. So that's why still a 300K image will ruin all the work we have done there. So let's stay with the source, but try to make it fast.
There was a couple of other very minor things that kind of niggle me a bit about it. So one is the way that over here we've got three icons that far too closely resemble one another. So this is the more drop down, as we call it. So it shows the toolbar buttons that we've suppressed, that we've turned off. That's the preview, and it flips from a closed eye to an open eye. And then that's the drop down of different types of preview that you can use.
Yeah, but I think the last one will be only for developers, so this will be disabled by default, right?
Yes, if you don't have the internals plugin present. So if I go to empty.html, there's no arrow there.
Yeah, and the closed eye, I had to click it to see what it does, because this one is not obvious what it does. So
no, I think I'm going to have to change it because it kind of so originally this was the icon for preview. The problem was that I wanted to distinguish the preview being open from being closed, and clever, the idea of the closed eye for the closed preview, but it just clearly doesn't. It just doesn't look right. I mean, it doesn't look like an. Even when I did it, I knew it didn't look like an eye, but it does look like an eye if you've seen the open eye. If you see what I mean, that then encourages you to see it as a closed eye.
Yeah.
But I don't have any super bright ideas for how to replace that. I'm also realizing this new link tool, so we can search for Tiddler, make a link out of it. we probably also need the equivalent for including a transclusion. Where
yeah, but I think there is the this is different. The excise tool is different.
Yeah, the excise tool takes. So if we take a fragment,
I take some text. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that would then turn it into a transclusion. And now there's a tiddler called Hello Mario with that.
Okay, yeah, right.
So I may, on the basis that it's quite similar to the existing link tool, I may end up adding that transclusion tool. And we still got all of this stuff too. Not that much.
Yeah, I like this very much. So have you tried it? Did you try it on your iPad or something?
I have. I am lucky enough to have an iPad Pro with a pencil, and it works really well. It could work better, as ever with. It sort of worked just well enough for me to be going, gosh, if I optimize this, it would be great.
Yeah, so I think what's missing is the pressure sensitivity, right?
Yeah, that's correct, and the pressure sensitivity data we do get in JavaScript for the Apple Pencil. So somewhere in my long list of undone tasks is to enhance the editor to be touch sensitive. And in fact, the touch sensitivity works the same on quite a few different platforms. It works on modern iPhones that have something called Force Touch on their touch screen. You can measure the pressure for that too.
And do you get this information, the Force Touch?
Yes, you do. On so I have an iPhone 6s, and there's this demo. If I press that, can you see that circle? That circle's increasing in size according to how hard I'm pressing. And it seems really seamless, and works quite reliably. Very nice.
Yeah. How do you save the image? Is it bitmap or is it?
It's bitmap, yeah. So you can choose whether it's a JPEG or a PNG. If it's a JPEG, it gets compressed and you get a little bit of fuzziness. And annoyingly, the PNGs that it generates, and I don't think are compressed. So there is lossless compression in PNGs.
Yeah.
I think in practice, the browsers will emit uncompressed.
Would there be, or is there a possibility to use GIF? Because is there a library which compresses?
No, we could.
Because I think GIF would be for screenshots. GIF would be okay. Also for a computer environment. For
I think
images, GIF is bad.
Yeah, no, GIF works. That is a GIF image.
Yeah, but can you save it as a compressed GIF?
If I say save image, no, it's still a PNG.
Okay.
Is some kind of licensing issue with GIFs there?
No, not for this environment. So they are getting bigger if you have this transparency mode set, because then you have more data, which is less compressible. But for let's say line drawings, I think GIF would be preferable.
I think, let me just see the code where we save it. So we use the canvas to data URL method.
Maybe some restrictions with the color range. That's right. But for standard drawings where you can decide which colors are allowed, the users won't get the difference. So if you compress or if you convert from an image from a screen from a let's say image JPEG to GIF, then you lose resolution because of the color range. But if you select the pen color, then there should be no loss.
So it seems as though yeah, I think it does work, you know. Yeah. Yeah, you can just set the type to GIF and what gets saved as a GIF.
Okay, so yeah, we can try to optimize the size there a little bit.
Well, yeah, and I imagine different browsers will do things differently. I don't know what the spec says, because no, see, I'm really suspicious whether it is actually a GIF, because how would it figure out the color palette to use, given that we don't have 24-bit GIFs? So I think the experiment I just ran, I think it saved a file with a GIF extension, but I think you may notice browsers don't trust image metadata. So if you have a URL of an image,
yeah,
browsers don't trust the content type. They don't trust the extension. Instead, they sniff the content of the image. So what that means is that on the web, if you have a JPEG image and you say, I'm a PNG, browsers don't care. They'll display it anyway. So I think that's what's happening here, where it's telling me that it's giving me a GIF and it's displaying, but in fact it's a PNG with a GIF extension.
Yeah, okay, yeah, maybe. We need some experiments.
But we should be. I'd also like better support of animated GIFs, and I have seen JavaScript libraries. I've seen JavaScript libraries for manipulating animated GIFs. They are obviously incredibly short, and they're brilliant for screencasts and showing what's on the screen. So it would be quite cool to integrate that. I'm just going to have a quick look in the message box. I haven't been reading what people said. Atul says, it would be a pleasure to see the masters coding TiddlyWiki on live coding. That's very good of you to say so, Atul. You could always watch it, speed it up if it was too boring. Hegart says that he's an MCP, a master of copy and paste, also known as a plagiarist programmer. But au contraire, Hegart, we all are. It's one of the things that that I really love. I mean, you think about all of the other endeavors of one of the things that's really fundamental about programming is that it is easy to copy from other people. That's not true of other things. It's not true of singing. It's not true of playing the guitar. You need to have the talent to do it. And yet, copying is obviously a vital part of learning, and is how we all started out. Atul mentions the idea of two rivers, one for personal to the tiddlers and another to send the tiddlers to Twitter. You remind me of a point, Atul, that's kind of frustrating. We still not making good use of today's wide screens, and multi-column story river, where I get to configure what type of tiddlers go into each column I really like. So things like annotation, having your original text in one column, annotating it in the next column. Discussion in, so it sounds like people are split between the dates in July that we've suggested, but it looks like Sylvian couldn't do the second date. And agreement that we need to sort things out on mobile. So I still do use TiddlyWiki a lot on my phone and my tablet, but I'm very conscious that it is a reasonably fast and efficient phone, and it would probably be quite good if I was running TiddlyWiki on an iPhone 4 or something.
I think it is much better if you have empty.html. So if you start a new notebook on the mobile, then it's quite okay. But if you get more and more tags and this stuff, then it slows down. So
Yeah, I think one of the things that basic things that we really should come back to is limiting the lengths of those lists, which in extreme situations making it so you only show the top 10 in each list and that you have to filter.
Yeah, I think it's not really the lists that are the problem. I think it's the flexibility of the UI that's the problem.
I don't think so. You look at the difference between being on the recent tab and the open tab. Say when you do a refresh, if you turn on instrumentation, you'll see that the performance is hugely dominated by which tab is open. Let's try it. And
yeah, probably. That's why I said I did some measurements on the PC, but that's not the counter because it's I don't know, it's an i5 or something like this, and on the laptop it's i7. So there you have no problems.
Okay, so let me screenshot. I've just rebuilt TiddlyWiki to include the, hopefully to include the performance stuff. So if you haven't seen this before, every time there's a refresh cycle, we print some, well, there's two situations. We print out the main render time and we print out the refresh time. And if I, as I was saying, switch to the open tab, you can see that it ran another refresh cycle. And
yeah, if you go more tags.
So that was 576 to get to more tags. And now if I go backwards and forwards, it'll be slightly optimized, 563. So that's with the more tab open, sorry, that's the vital number to be looking at, the main refresh time.
Yeah.
526 with the open tab, we're seeing, we're seeing 53. So if I maybe close that tiddler to force it. So that's a 10 times worse performance just for being on the tag list. And if we look at something like the recent tab, that's not so bad, 200. So the recent tab is 4 times slower than the open tab. The contents tab.
Yeah, but you are on a powerful PC at the moment, and
well, the comparisons work. So the even on a fast PC, that the enormous slowdown of the tabs list is really obvious, and that's not to do with configurability. I believe what it is slightly embarrassing, but that the way that macros are implemented is slightly suboptimal in that there are situations where macros are completely reparsed and re-rendered on every refresh cycle. And so I think one of the things that has sort of crept in is some suboptimal use of macros where that's happening.
Okay, that may be, yeah.
Because I mean, there's basically when we refresh a macro, if the text of the so it's something I really should look at, and you're certainly helping me by continuing to remind me of the performance issues. I mean, so I think you and other people have told me performance figures on the kind of real world hardware that you're using, and it's very thought-provoking.
The point is that I consider my hardware up to date. And it's still I still it's not optimal. So
no, it's a very difficult one because I made the decision at the beginning of TiddlyWiki 5 to target it for the next 25 years. So quite consciously, I'm assuming that the smartphones and everything are going to get faster.
Yes.
And some of that is happening. I mean, JavaScript performance on modern Apple devices is pretty good. I mean, desktop fast.
Yeah, and I also think that the developers, for example, in Firefox, they are making fast progress with their new rendering engine, which is about, I don't know, 20 times faster with the new programming language. So we definitely can expect a lot more performance because they do a great job, I don't know, in 2 or 3 versions. So this will be, I don't know, several months.
But I do think imagine a simplified TiddlyWiki page template which wasn't translatable, which was only configurable by going to a place and typing stuff, so didn't have all the interactive configurability for switching off and on toolbar buttons. I think that would be a really interesting little project, and again, making those kind of speed performance comparisons with the current system.
Yeah, I was thinking about this several times already. The point is that the flexibility of TiddlyWiki is really great. So you go to the control panel and then you enable and disable your tool or your buttons, your tiller buttons. But on the other hand, I think the whole UI is relatively stable at the moment. So at the very beginning, there was much more. I think there was much more need for the configurability because we didn't know what we want. But now I think, the overall UI is quite stable. So with if really performance is important, then there may be a chance that if we have a good theme which has better performance, then the flexibility will be, let's say, second, I don't know.
Okay.
Will be lower in importance.
So, Atul's saying baking a personalized TiddlyWiki online with only the required functionality. It's a very interesting idea that we could have a tool that creates a custom page template for a user that is there. So you'd create it over here, and then you'd take it and put it in your TiddlyWikis, and you'd do the configuration over here, and that kind of separation. Hegart, bye-bye. Thank you very much. Glad you could join us. We're taking people through midnight. It's 1 a.m. in New Zealand, but I'm very pleased you could join us. Hope you can join us next time.
See you.
Yeah,
bye.
okay, thanks for that. Yeah, it's been really interesting. Thanks a lot. Catch you all later.
Pleasure. Glad you could join us. So,
Jeremy,
oh, sorry.
hey, Jeremy, I might log off as well. It's not quite as late here as in New Zealand, but I need an early start in the morning, so I might try and join again soon.
Mal, that was great to see you. Glad you could join us. Look forward to seeing you next time. Cheers. And Sylvain, I think you were trying to say something too. Oh, Sylvain, you're off as well. Sylvain, bye-bye. We'll catch you later. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
So, Mario, perhaps a pull request that you might want to consider is a pull request to make the page template switchable.
Yeah, probably. I will think about it. I think
that would be a really interesting place to start, and would be, yeah, I think we would discover just how baroque TiddlyWiki has grown.
Yeah, I think it would be a good experiment, yeah.
And just searching through the code in the background for references to core UI page template, there's not many. It would be perfectly feasible to, well, there's a couple of different approaches we could take.
Yeah, but yeah, the biggest problem is that it should still have the functionality the same as the functionality, so this will be the biggest problem. But yes, yeah, you're right. So,
but then, if we made it, the thing that's really nice is if you made it switchable, so that you could dynamically switch. So to your point, that this is about what performance on mobile is about what hits the DOM. It's not about the overall size of the HTML file.
Yeah, right.
An interface, a lightweight interface that worked well on a mobile phone, even if it only had 80% coverage, would be fine, because one would just switch back to the normal heavyweight interface for those operations that weren't efficient or convenient in the accelerated interface.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I was also thinking about let's say something like a compiled templates, because there is the possibility that I think the rendering functions have something that you can deeply read the structure, so that you can include in the output, you can include the transclusions. So let's say the first step would be that you configure your UI and then say, okay, compile. And then you get something that is fixed. But then you switch back to the flexible version and say, okay, I want this button, and then you say compile again, and then you're done. This would be also
I see what you mean. So I go to Control Panel. I can do two things. I can switch to an alternative page template. It gives me a whole new user interface. I can also press a plus button, which then takes me through a dialogue, asks me some questions, and then creates a new tiddler that is an alternative page template.
Yeah, it is a big one, and it will be not very readable, but it should have the functionality. And then I say, okay, give me this button, compile, and then you get something completely unreadable but working, and probably faster, hopefully faster.
Fascinating. I would encourage you to experiment with this, and yeah, I'll give it some more thought. Maybe I'll have a look at what's involved in that.
Yeah, because I think that there are some functions in your API that have the possibility to create something like this already. It's just I didn't have a look at which parts you still have to have that you get some flexibility. So because the CSS still has to work.
Yes. Well, except you could maybe take the opportunity to switch themes as well.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah, but okay, but then you need to create the new CSS. Yeah. I don't think that CSS is slow, because
no, CSS is just very unmaintainable. That's
yeah, and I also think that the browser vendors they are really great at optimizing the CSS internally, so we actually don't see it. Yeah. And I think they do a great job. So, and also if you read the blog posts in the web, most of them say don't care about the CSS or don't do micro optimizing because it's not worth it anymore.
No, I mean I think that the problem is that we have ended up with very verbose, repetitive CSS with things like the multiple implementations of drop downs, and some of that stuff could do with a good cleanup.
Yeah, but I think we have a lot of classes assigned that are not needed or not used at the moment. But I think that the browsers figured this out and they don't slow down, because I think we have really a lot of classes which are not used by the browsers.
Maybe.
So, but I don't think that makes the stuff slower. What really does matter is drop shadows and this stuff on different browsers.
Yes, drop shadows is something we definitely, well, I mean, hopefully the site says this, but to switch to vanilla instead of Snow White, it does make an enormous difference to screen.
Yeah.
Just bear with me 1 second, I've just got to do something.
So Mario, we'll see you in July, hopefully when we all meet face to face.
Yeah, would be really interesting. So yeah.
There's a lot to learn. As in, I saw your the Linux version of TiddlyWiki. I didn't get to play around with it, but I know that you made one some time back. And that you have also worked on TiddlySpace and TiddlyWeb sort of a thing, which I'd always wanted but never could figure out how to go about. So
yeah,
it would be a pleasure.
Yeah, TiddlyWeb. I think that the basic structure of TiddlyWeb and let's say the social features, especially the include mechanism, which is part of TiddlySpace, where you can include someone else's content as read-only, but still edit it, and then you practically clone it. This concept is really, really powerful, and the problem is that it's hard to use for standard users, but the concept would be really great for the multi-user experience. And on the server side, they're going through a big change at the moment. So they are discussing about microservices. I don't know. Have you heard about this on the server space? No. But everyone is in the whole industry is transformed at the moment, going up to Microsoft. So they include this concept, and I have a great hope that we have the possibility to create something that is similar to TiddlySpace, but local and usable for standard users. But all the stuff is a little bit too complicated. It's much easier at the moment, but still not for everyone. And this is the big problem. So our users go a great length of complexity just to keep the file nature of TiddlyWiki. But some of them really would need the server nature of TiddlyWiki. But the server still, using a server is still a little bit too complicated.
Well, I guess I'll look it up. I still don't have any clue what you're saying. But the last I understood was the lambda function, which Jeremy sort of
That's exactly what I was going to bring up again. That this is an area where I am also keenly experimenting. Weirdly, part of the a kind of a particular focus of attention for the industry over the last 3 or 4 months has been this idea of serverless computing. And it's hilarious that in the mainstream, what serverless means is not computing without a server, but rather computing without a server that you control. So instead, your code runs in a browser and it invokes services hosted by Google or Twilio or Twitter or whoever. And you don't have an actual server that you have to build and worry about the antivirus and the denial of service attacks and so on. And of course, because TiddlyWiki has always had this single file nature, we've been experimenting with that way of working for an awfully long time. We're way back at BT, at Osmosoft. We were interested in keeping the logic within TiddlyWiki, within the single file, but invoking services on the web to do the things that you can't do within the single file.
Then also what matters.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry?
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to catch you.
I don't know. I'm sorry, but I can't understand you. There's some problem with the audio for me.
Atul said that sorry, he didn't mean to interrupt you. You carry on.
So okay. Yeah, and also what's important for me is that also the price for bare metal servers is going down and down. So I don't know, at the moment there is a possibility to have a server where TiddlyWiki or TiddlyWeb runs for $1.99. And it's bare metal. It's
a real
$2.99 or $1.99. Yeah, I think that the $1 version is virtual hardware, but still, this is not very much priced anymore. And you have, I don't know, about 50 gigabytes of SSD memory, which should be enough for many use cases. So if we could create a system where a user just says, okay, this is the application, start it, and it's for me, and everything is done automatically, and they just use it. This would be a possibility, or it should be a possibility.
Hopefully this is all good timing. My plan is I want to make the multi-user features in TiddlyWiki 5 work well with TiddlyWeb first, because I still think...
With the existing TiddlyWeb?
Yeah, because we're a long way from being able to run the TiddlyWiki 5 built-in server on the public internet. There's just so many things that it doesn't do. and yet it is the public internet scenarios that you know, some of the most basic use cases that people are interested in.
Yeah, it's also part. As I said, I'd like to meet Chris Dent because the tiddlyweb is programmed in Python, and I know JavaScript. I don't know Basic and Pascal and C and all this stuff, but I really have a hard time to get my head around Python. I don't know. There is something I don't like, and so that's why it's really difficult. But I think the concept of tiddlyweb and tiddlyspace is really great, and we have tested it for several years, and also in scale.
Yeah.
So I think, and I don't know that there is no need for bug fixes anymore. So this, let's say, the standard works, and we have ironed out all the gotchas. So
that's a big deal.
It's really great to bring.
And the fact that I know TiddlyWeb can do everything I need without needing to make any further modifications, which is one of the things that you just said there, is actually really powerful, because when you're working on a system with two ends, if you've got to work on them both at the same time, if you see what I mean,
right.
4 times the complexity when only one of them is changing.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And as I said, so in the server community, they go with the microservice, and I think this is a really big transformation at the moment. What's going on, and you really have the possibility to use different providers. You have your own providers in your own country that can work with a package that is standardized and is the same for everyone. I think this would be a great way, and it even works with Microsoft, with Windows. So this is the best thing. So that also they see the I don't know, they are forced to use it, I think.
Yeah, I think we're getting to the point where, well, like we were with JavaScript itself, you know, when TiddlyWiki started, JavaScript wasn't taken seriously as a language. I would meet people in the industry who would essentially, well, they wouldn't believe that TiddlyWiki could do the things that I said it could do, because their understanding of JavaScript was so limited, and the rest of the world has arguably caught up now.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Check. Is the sound any better now?
Oh yes, ArmChar.
Okay,
that's great.
So there was something definitely foobar with my Bluetooth stack.
Yeah, it's better.
You're back. Welcome.
Yeah. Not to derail the discussion, which is very interesting, but I would like, if you guys are interested, to get back for a minute to the question of mobile devices, and especially in light of switchable templates, page templates. Because I've been trying to make a personal comeback to TiddlyWiki recently, and in a special context where most users I was interested in reaching out to were using mobile devices. And I found out 2 main issues with TiddlyWiki, one of which is indeed slower than it used to be on most mobile devices, except for people who have last generation hardware, maybe. And the other one is not a new issue, but I forgot about it, which is one of interface and usability from the inherent limitation that most people will use an on-screen keyboard on a relatively small screen. And therefore you have very limited display relay state to render text. And TiddlyWiki lending itself to typing in list or bullet point type composition, you run out of screen pretty fast, and the resizing of the text box is not always easy, and so on. And so I was thinking, when you were talking about different templates, that could maybe open an option to let people choose their own templates and customize view templates separately from edit templates with minimal effort, so that users could come up with presets that would be adapted to various screen sizes and resolution and that sort of stuff. Because basically when you're typing inside a text box in TiddlyWiki, on a mobile device at least, unless it's an iPad or a big screen like that, you want to have as little fuss around the text box as possible, and to maximize the screen space that you can use to actually see the text that you're typing.
Okay, sorry, I dropped my headphones. You might have noticed that just when I was about to speak. Very interesting. So, ArmChar, firstly, you remind me that very little has changed in TiddlyWiki's mobile presentation since you were last around a couple of years ago, 18 months ago. The main thing that has changed is performance, where we've kept on adding features to TiddlyWiki, which I think have probably made it, noticeably slower. The page template switching idea is very interesting. I had fixing the mobile experience on my list for this year, and hadn't really given it much thought beyond kind of what the needs are. Things like I mentioned, we wanting to be able to access the sidebar without having to scroll to the top and so on. But I think maybe that the switchable page templates may just be the technique we need, because it's kind of an oversight that you can't switch the page template at the moment. You know, you can switch themes, but you can't switch the page template. Interesting.
Another, if I may add another layer on top of that, is I've been finding myself in a special context that's especially fitting in principle to TiddlyWiki lately, which is I've been part of the digital branch of something that's happening in France right now, which is called Nuit Debout, which is some sort of a citizen movement happening in France.
Can you put the URL in the chat window?
Yeah, sure. As soon as Hangout on tablets is terrible too. I'm on some sort of micro tablets. It's like a 7-incher, and that's probably the worst of both worlds when it comes to mobile apps, because nothing is designed for that. So that will be the main site. Not sure it will be of much help because it's mostly in French. But behind that. But behind that, we have there's a wiki, there are some message boards and stuff like that, and the basic context of this thing is some sort of a permanent protest in the spirit of M15 or Occupy a couple of years back.
I see.
And so TiddlyWiki, being by design some sort of a guerrilla platform, is in principle optimal for that, except it was designed with computers in mind, and most people don't pack a laptop on a public plaza when they expect to be swatted any minute, so, which happens about twice a day. So typically they will have mobile phones that they use a lot to record and tape whatever's happening. And we have started to deploy some pirateboxes based on RasPi hardware, and that act as local Wi-Fi servers and audio relays in some instances to help with the conferencing when the assemblies grow too big and that sort of stuff. And we use cell phones as actual loudspeaker systems or multi-speaker systems. And I figured TiddlyWiki could be super helpful to broadcast information and allow people to make records and stuff like that. But I found out very quickly that the combination between the learning curve of TiddlyWiki in general and the lack of ergonomics, the lacking ergonomics of using them or using that on a cell phone made it really not practical at all. Which is a bit of a shame because, in principle, it's the perfect platform for that sort of
There's a couple of things.
situation.
One is we've been talking about running standalone TiddlyWiki on mobile platforms. Of course, often if you've got users on a mobile platform, you're better still to give them a static HTML version of the information that has been exported from TiddlyWiki. And that we've got reasonably well developed. You can export static stuff in the browser, and there's quite good support under Node.js for building static sites out of individual tiddlers. But it's still, well, it requires Node.js to do it in an efficient way. The other thought is I'm very interested in those kinds of field applications. I'm really interested in the idea of running a TiddlyWiki server on a decent phone out in the field. So imagine a scenario where somebody does have an iPhone 6S. The iPhone 6S is a 64-bit processor with 2 GB of RAM. It's absolutely capable of running TiddlyWiki as a server and supporting a bunch of users, and the worst that's going to happen is your battery is going to go flat. So imagine somebody who does have a sufficiently fast phone running the TiddlyWiki server, then individuals around them connect to the Wi-Fi network that they've hosted and browse an interface that's based on individual separate static files, which they can navigate between. So that kind of setup, you've got, I think, some nice advantages. There's still a wiki in the middle, so there's still a dynamic wiki. You can still do updates in the field, and yet you're not burdening all of the individuals who are just accessing information from having to download the entire TiddlyWiki client.
I also think that the Raspberry Pi is quite capable of running tiddlyweb, for example. So
yes,
tiddlyweb itself doesn't need that many resources. And how many users are connecting at the same time?
Well, it varies widely depending on context. It can go from random users just dropping in one at a time to a couple hundreds at a time, all running on a local Wi-Fi connection, because we're talking about pirateboxes, so not hooked on the internet. So it's not much of a problem from a hardware standpoint in terms of having the method to run the server. It's more an issue on one side of architecture, meaning the optimal setup would probably not so much be a web server running locally, as it will be something that could operate along the lines of an all-time BBS or news group, where people are able to drop stuff on the server that could be used to feed the wiki, and they could contribute individually and then grab a copy of whatever has changed in the meantime, and keep it stored locally on their own machine. And that's half of the problem. And the other half, which is the big half that we were talking about just before, is one of economics, that you have a share of the population that will only use those resources as basically a how-to or feed manual, and people who will contribute 1 cent. And on mobile devices, especially on phones, the screen real estate issues make it so that there will be a strong benefit in having a reader layout, if you want, or a reader template that basically does away with all unnecessary buttons and menus and stuff to maximize legibility. And you can, of course, do that by exporting a static HTML version, but then you need a competent or semi-competent admin on site, or because we are talking offline servers, basically, who will be able to do the exports and generate the static HTML file periodically and do whatever edits are necessary. Whereas, ideally, what will be fantastic for that sort of context will be the ability for people to message tiddlers, basically, to the server and grab a fresh copy, including their message tiddlers. Much in the way tiddlyweb allows to do now.
Yeah.
See, for the time being, I'm trying to do something similar in India, And the way I'm approaching is we have BiblioBox, or it's a version of piratebox, and you can it's an open write Linux, which you can stick it to any. There are so many different routers you can put it on, and piratebox gives you the ability to share files anonymously, and there's also a built-in forum. It's an image forum. So essentially, we take photographs, and then you can put it on the forum and whatever else that you have to write. That way, everybody can read the forum. Will not be able to take it offline through a wiki or anything, but they can definitely share videos and images. And the way I'm running TiddlyWiki on piratebox is essentially it's just an HTML file for sharing. So somebody has to prepare it and just put it on the box, and somebody just downloads it. And but it's not something that multiple people can sort of add on to it. So it's not a TiddlyWiki server that I'm running, and that's obviously the next logical step. But until we reach that stage, I believe piratebox running on $30–40 worth of router hardware, and we can immediately have something which will serve the immediate requirement.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I mean, these, going back to one of the earlier discussions, which we just touched on, the difference between TiddlyWiki's standalone nature and its nature running under Node.js. What we've just been talking about here is kind of a shortfall of TiddlyWiki, that it's not optimum in all situations involving mobile devices. But what we just talked through that's quite interesting is solutions that are around both the Node.js version and around the standalone version. It's as if having these two different modes of deployment gives us, with every problem that we face, it gives us two different fields within which we can address that problem. So, we talked about running Node.js, TiddlyWiki on a phone, running it on a Raspberry Pi as one approach, versus most of the current approaches actually are about running the standalone version on a smartphone, but enhancing it so that it can do save changes, etc. So very interesting. I will, in the background, I will try to resist the temptation to make the page template switchable until after I got 5.1.12 out of the door.
Yeah, I just did a test with my mobile again with the pre-release, and there is a problem. There is one good thing, so that the typing experience is much better, because I don't know, it seems it does no page refresh, but it always goes to select mode, my cursor. So I have no possibility to select something. It's really funny. I need to dig deeper a little bit. What's the problem?
Can't select the text that's in the text box.
Yeah, in the text box. So if I want to select a word, it's not possible, because it always is in select all mode. So the cursor gets this select something.
And what kind of device is that?
It's a Ubuntu phone. It's something special.
And that's running some version of Firefox, presumably?
No, it's their own browser. It's maybe it's a browser problem too. Yeah, but yeah, I'll have a closer look to it.
That's hilarious.
Another thing I am trying to do at my end is that we have these books like skill. Normal books, like normal worksheets, and if we can stick QR codes on it, then people with the mobile phone click on the QR code, and the local router feeds them with whatever resource that QR code has built in. But what was coming to my mind is that there's a .js, there's a JavaScript which generates the QR code, and if I could have that functionality built into TiddlyWiki, then it could which I know it's possible. It's just that that way the linking, the finding, the searchability of a particular resource becomes so much more easier and so much more dynamic. Because typically, if you go into a pirate box, you have to go through those files and figure out for yourself which ones you want, which ones you've already downloaded, or this new one. But that way, information exchange can become more dynamic. I've yet to put all my thoughts together, but that is another addition or maybe another functionality of TiddlyWiki we should.
So you want to create a QR code for a link, for a TiddlyWiki
Yes.
link or for a Tiddler link?
No.
For another document.
For another document. So a TiddlyWiki has a table which says something on the left, just a little explanation with a QR code. So people can just pick things off the router, resources off the router, just by clicking, just by scanning the QR code. That way, information exchange can become so much more faster.
Yeah, yeah. And what's the problem now? Creating the QR code? Or?
No, QR code I am dynamically creating on Excel sheet, and then I'm, as of now, printing those sheets, and but even maybe exporting them as HTML or something. But if the same thing could be done in the TiddlyWiki, then we have another level of functionality.
Freedom. Yeah, I have had a look. I don't know. It's about 2 months to 3 months ago for some JavaScript libraries that can create QR links, but I'm not sure anymore if it worked. I'll have a look. Maybe I'll find something.
It's a shame that QR codes, I assume, you can only resolve a QR code by going onto the internet. I mean, when you scan it, what you get back is a URL, and all mobile phones know what to do with that URL is to open it, I assume.
Yeah, the QR code generation through JavaScript has to be done online. But once we have scanned it on the phone, the link could be to a local router, like a pirate box, and so the real resource could be, so the use of the internet would be very little, and the downloading could be locally. Because I see what the kind of situations we're having in France or so many other places around, that we would be requiring these hotspots where people would gather together for more exchange things, and it could be for education skilling or for general communication, social issues that we are.
Yeah, one good thing, I guess, is that's I mean, a big chunk of that is the vision of piratebox and BiblioBox and those projects. I'm not sure that I understand the relationships between them all.
They're the same. They're essentially the same. They're just slight variations of one another. Yeah, it's just different editions.
Yeah, and LibreNote. So
same thing. French. One is in French. The other one does something. There's a BiblioBox, which is sort of focused towards sharing of Bible resources. Then there is so the way I understand, they're all just siblings of each other.
Yeah.
But essentially doing the same thing. Yeah.
And LibreNote has the lovely characteristic of having a TiddlyWiki-based website. I'm trying to find it.
I haven't checked that out.
Not LibreNote. What's the underlying?
There's piratebox, and then there is a library box. And the library box, and then there is a Bible box. They're essentially three. Of course, there's another called Idea box, but slight variations. There's a router, and there's an OpenWrite Linux, and then there is slight modifications on it.
And so what is this? Did I just put the link through? Oh, and perhaps I should screen share so the people at home can see. So this is a website for LibreNote, and I quite like it as an example because it's a public website built with the full version of TiddlyWiki.
So this is just a CMS sort of a version, a mutation of TiddlyWiki. This is just TiddlyWiki at the end of the day.
Right, but this is designed to run on one of these boxes, isn't it?
No, not necessarily. I mean, this is just an HTML file. So you could download it just like a normal TiddlyWiki, and whether we put it in the box or not, it's the same thing. This is just a variation of.
So LibreNote is just an edition of TiddlyWiki.
That's correct. That is correct. And the links to Chakra and Git, etc. These are just just the text or the. It's just another version. It's just another edition.
I see. We actually should be drawing towards the close. I've just noticed, though, that there's a couple of questions in the Q&A box, and so I'm just going to pick those up. First one from Matt Goldman. Hi guys, we'll listen in background, maybe a chance to jump in later. I see in the agenda it is planned to speak about finishing up TW5, and I'm not sure it's been defined what exactly is part of this and what is beyond that. This, Matt, was the conversation that we had at the Hangout, I think at the end of January, beginning of February, and it was my reaction to the dawning anniversary of TiddlyWiki 5. It'll be 5 years since I started work on it, come September, October time this year. And the particular concern was that there are a number of areas of TiddlyWiki that haven't been properly finished, that they're really just experimental. And we've talked about two of them today, TiddlyWiki's support for smartphones and TiddlyWiki's support for multi-user server operation. So when I talk about finishing it, I mean that I think from a certain perspective, I got a bit distracted from both those things are really mainstream, very important bits of functionality for TiddlyWiki. But in practice, I've been working on a bunch of other stuff that's less important, but kind of more interesting or something. So that's what I mean by finishing up TiddlyWiki 5. And what's beyond it? It's not so much that, because TiddlyWiki for me is what I imagine I hope I'll continue working on TiddlyWiki forever in some form. It's more that it's kind of embarrassing for the project to be 5 years old and for us to have not finished off kind of that easy basic, well, not easy, but that basic stuff. And having said that, I've said before in Hangouts, I'm really interested in, there are some things I'd like to do with TiddlyWiki which would take me a bit further away from the product as you know it today, and in particular I would like to rewrite parts of TiddlyWiki as a C application that can run on embedded devices and servers, and that's kind of a research project of mine. And then Matt continues with, if it's not possible to define specifics, maybe there's a general, this is what people should experience in order for it to be called finished. So Matt, I don't know, maybe you missed the discussion, but the last 3 or 4 Hangouts, the wikis for the Hangouts have included extensive notes on what I think, or what we think, because it's the result of our discussions, are the important features to finish off. So let me very briefly screen share again. So we're talking about lowering barriers to contribution, becoming more newcomer friendly, but some specific things in there. Updating the website quicker, better support for third-party libraries, better multi-user operation, bunch of other cleanups. Something we haven't mentioned, making the basic editions of TiddlyWiki that we distribute more useful by doing more specific things, so having a notebook edition, a survey edition, a task edition, etc. So, that list of things that could be done to TiddlyWiki but haven't been done yet could be as long as your arm, but that is an attempt to try and whittle it down to the really important stuff. In fact, what happened then was that I figured out how to do the toolbar, and I've spent the last 2 weeks the last 2 months not working on those things in the finishing TiddlyWiki 5 list, but rather on working on the toolbar. But as we've discussed, I think the toolbar is important and worth the investment. Okay, anything else from anybody else before we draw to a close? So I think it's only for me to...
There was a little discussion on making the plugin library easier for everybody to make one. And I mean, this is something I need to be doing now, and I don't know how to begin.
So the challenge here has been TiddlyWiki now has a plugin library. It works well with the standalone edition, doesn't work with the Node.js edition, as we discussed. The challenge of making it so that third-party developers who want to publish a plugin can do so through the plugin library turns out to be quite complicated. Plugin authors want different things, and they want to have a good deal of control, and that turns out to be slightly at odds with the basis of the official plugin library is partly about making plugins explicitly be a shared community resource, because we've had problems in the past with people who've created a plugin and then they've drifted away from the community and the plugin has been kind of orphaned. And so that really lay behind the design of the plugin library, this idea that the community should be able to maintain a population of plugins for sharing. But in order for it to work like that, it's not super smooth for individual plugin authors, because you've got if I'm distributing some code on tiddlywiki.com, as you know, a TiddlyWiki plugin could be malevolent. It could do evil things. So at one extreme, we don't want to make it too easy for anybody to create some code and upload a plugin that they stole people's personal data, or tried to use a timing attack to steal their banking credentials. So there's those issues make a shared plugin library, the core as we have it, kind of quite a difficult thing to use to meet everybody's objectives. So what I'm proposing as the next step is to improve support for third-party plugin libraries. So the way that this would work is that by default, an empty TiddlyWiki knows how to connect to the TiddlyWiki plugin library and get its plugins from there. But we extend that mechanism so that you would be able to connect to other people's plugin repositories. So Toby BSA or you, Atul, might publish your own plugin library, and that's the way that you get your plugins distributed and updated. So it's not the reason why I want to do that one first is because that also supports interesting cases like a school that wants to run its own plugin library. Steve wants to run a plugin library for design rights students, and he's going to use that plugin library to distribute the coursework to them, for instance. It would be a great use case of a third-party plugin library, and it would obviously be inappropriate for a case like that for all of the content to be pushed through the core TiddlyWiki plugin library. So 2 steps, as I said. First step is making it easy to interact with third-party plugin libraries. Second step is trying to make it easier for plugin authors to submit and maintain core plugins.
Yeah, my use case is very similar. There are curriculum on different subjects, and the curriculum we want to make them, like instead of having a huge curriculum for a qualification, we have those tiddler skills, small learnings. And the way the learning takes place is that depending upon the need and the situation, a person downloads a particular plugin, which essentially is nothing but a curriculum, maybe in the form of a checklist, where he says, I know this, I don't know this, and then what he doesn't know, then he can sort of click, and then we can send him some content based on it. So the learning is at a very micro level. So Tiddly learning, Tiddly skills, and so we have the curriculum. I have broken it into smaller bits and pieces that each of them will form a plugin. And I just need to have a very easy way of putting it up. I mean, of course, it's all community. It's nothing private. And
okay.
So,
well, we should perhaps we should discuss on the group any help that we can give you, because I think what you want to do is very achievable, and it would be quite cool to see that working. I mean, I host the main official plugin library on my GitHub pages, so there's no real infrastructure required beyond that, which is available for free.
Yeah. Infrastructure is also not a problem. It's that, you know, what you said. There is an addition of a TiddlyWiki, which tells, you know, which enables me to put in tiddlers, which sort of become plugins, and all I have to do is put that wiki on somewhere, and then the other empty wiki that gets distributed gets linked to that wiki, and people can start downloading those tiddlers as plugins.
And it reminds me of a point that, again, we've touched on before, which is that the technology that we use to build the plugin library is the same technology that we're using for federation. And some, you know, kind of the cases that you were talking about, actually federation makes a really nice, makes a better model in a way, better way to think about it than plugin libraries, because federation, the whole point of it is that you can replicate any of the structures or nodes that you see within the federation.
Right. But maybe until we don't reach that point, if we could just have it as a intermittent, immediate solution, so everybody could start using this until federation sort of reaches the maturity.
Absolutely, and that that plugin library stuff is you know, it's good to go now. And what I'm saying really is that by using the plugin library, you would be using federation, because it's the same techniques. Okay, so I must draw to a close, but let me thank you all very much for joining me today. Much appreciate it, and for our guests who've already had to go to bed due to it being so late on the other side of the planet. But thank you very much. I can't really believe that this is the end of the 100th Hangout. It seems just the other day that I thought it might be quite interesting to try the discipline of a weekly Hangout. It's certainly not ended up being weekly, but it's a very enjoyable part of my working life, and I really enjoy it. So
hats off to you for so much of you know, so much of dedication over so many years, maybe so many more. So congratulations for the 100th. Yeah.
That's it. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I shall stop the broadcast, so we'll wave goodbye to everybody, and then we'll still be online for a minute. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.